Welcome to the SBI podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Hello, SBI podcast subscribers. My name is Scott Brewer. I am a partner with SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm dedicated to helping you make your number. With me is my co-host, Ryan Tognazzini, a principal with SBI. On the show, we discuss sales and marketing emerging best practices for viewers just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Here we go, Togs. You ready?
Let's do this.
All right. On today's show, we are going to discuss a topic that is vital to revenue growth: strategic alignment between functional leaders. Most leaders will tell you they communicate with their functional peers, and of course they do. But communication happens, but because most of it is reactive because of all the demands in your time, it doesn't happen consistently, and the communication isn't about the right topics. Ryan, what types of issues have you seen when leaders are trying to stay in strategic alignment across different departments?
Yeah, a lot of times communication is really reactive instead of purposeful. So something happens in the business, and the marketing leader goes to the sales leader to discuss it. And this is really in the business communication, and it typically isn't strategic. It's a fire drill of some sort. Yeah. So instead of talking about the right course of action and how to think through allocating people, money, and time, the discussion is about how to fix a leak in the pipes, if you will. And so a lot of these things lead to one-off tactics instead of really being aligned strategically.
Yep. Can you give us, the audience, an example of that?
Yeah. So some of you guys might be launching a new product coming up this year, and how many of you have connected your product roadmap to your headcount plan, as an example? So what I mean by that is, let's say you're launching a new product and it's a cloud offering and you've sold primarily premise-based solutions for the last 5 years or what have you. Is the same rep going to sell that? Is it going to be a different rep? What are the implications of using one versus the other to do that? And so if you're not connected to product strategy, connecting to that headcount plan, you're operating a little bit in the dark.
Yeah, and I would also add to that you need to make sure marketing is allocating the right amount of budget to that product to drive demand for that headcount and sales.
Sure.
Right?
And so, coming back to the theme of being reactive here and being out of, strategic alignment. So you launch the product, you put it in the sales rep's bag who's been selling the other stuff for the last 5 years, and all of a sudden it doesn't sell. Mm-hmm. And, the fire drill happens, everybody gets in a room and starts freaking out about how come we didn't sell this product, or how come we're not selling, why aren't we making the number, what's actually happening? Yeah. And so everybody runs around and starts doing a whole bunch of tactical stuff instead of really thinking through, like, what's the real strategy here and what are we actually trying to accomplish?
Yeah, and you've already poured the money into the product and it's just sitting on the shelf. Right?
Yep.
And you start hiring, try to catch up, but by then, you're probably getting outpaced by your competition.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's maybe talk a little bit about and turn to defining what really alignment is for the audience. So to do this, we're going to be operating on pages 12 and 13 of the Make Your Number in 2016 workbook. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about the revenue growth maturity model. So in this model, it ranks people from a 1 to 5. And some of you may recognize this. Maturity models are not necessarily new, but we've applied this discipline to sales effectiveness. So Scott, let's start off and talk a little about, so what's happening if I'm in level 1?
Chaos. So I love the term chaos, but it's actually a good term here. So you might have a corporate strategy, but you don't have functional strategies defined, right? So there's inconsistent performance. Tactics are the name of the game. Your heroic efforts of a few are getting numbers, but you have no idea what's going to happen in the future.
Yep. And so if we move to level 2, here you've got strategies that actually exist. They get done, it's sort of as part of the annual planning exercise. So for those of you who write down your goals on New Year's Eve and stuff them in your sock drawer and then never look at them again throughout the course of the year, you would be a level 2 in this example. So they get done, they get planned, but they're not actually implemented. So that really constitutes 2. So Let's talk about level 3, which would be implemented.
Yeah, so level 3 implemented, you have a corporate strategy, you have functional strategies that are defined, and they've also been implemented within each one of those functions. So everyone in that function understands the strategies. You have more predictability. You have processes in place. Some are adopted, but maybe not executed as well as they could be, but you're starting to become a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, and the key to the level 3 is even though you have them and they're implemented, you're operating in silos, meaning marketing's got their strategy and is off doing their thing. Sales has their strategy and they're off doing their thing. You know, the HR group has a talent strategy and they're off doing their thing. So how about level 4? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so level 4 is managed. And the difference between 3 and 4 is now you actually have a cross-functional alignment between the strategies. So whereas in level 3 you were siloed, now you're not. So you're actually aligned internally across each strategy, and you get that multiplier effect of being aligned. The missing piece is you're not aligned to the market. So that's a lead in there for level 5.
Yep, exactly, which is predictable. So you've got your functional strategies aligned and across all of the departments, but you're also aligned to the external markets, and you're making decisions based on what's happening in the external markets. So taking an outward in view. So let's go back to our example.
Yeah.
So first question for you is, where would you plot this company that launched the new product, missed the number, the headcount plan wasn't necessarily tied to the product roadmap?
Yeah, in this case, I mean, making the assumption that they actually had defined functional strategies because they were launching a new product, et cetera, it seems like to me they'd be in level 3 implemented. Mm-hmm. They had functional strategies, they were executing within their functions, but they didn't have alignment across the functions, which is why, to your point, when they launched the product, they didn't have a great headcount plan, they weren't driving the amount of leads they needed, et cetera.
Yep, and then hence the aforementioned fire drill. So, and really what happens here when you're stuck at level 3 or even 2 and 1 is it leads to things like higher customer acquisition costs and lower customer lifetime value, which decreases your chance of making the number. So you want to move up that maturity model stack as quickly and as effectively as you possibly can. And you need to break down the silos to really raise above a level 3. So talk a little bit about, for the audience, just defining customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value.
Yeah, so we just introduced 2 new metrics here, concepts. Customer acquisition cost is how much you spend to acquire 1 new customer, right? So if you spend $1 million on sales and marketing to acquire customers and you acquire 10 of them in that time period, right? How much would your acquisition cost be? Be $100,000, right? Lifetime value, customer lifetime value is how much does a customer spend with you over their entire lifetime with you as a customer. So if you have them for 10 years, they spend $10 a year, simple example, $100, right?
Yep.
That's their lifetime value. And really the ratio between those is really important. And as customer acquisition cost goes up, you need lifetime value to also increase, right?
Yep. So let's bring this point home as it relates to being reactive and being, siloed and what levels you're in, et cetera. So going back to our product launch example and our headcount plan. So, I mean, here, what the implications of being a level 1 or a level 2 company here is, you're launching these products, they're not selling, so now perhaps you're going to dump a bunch of cash in the marketing department and basically say, hey, go generate some demand. Or maybe you start offering spiffs to the sales force and saying, hey, I'll pay an extra, 2x on this deal if you can go sell a new product. So all of a sudden, that cost to acquire that customer starts to go up.
Yep.
Potentially you're bringing in the wrong types of customers anyway, so the lifetime value is going down because those customers ultimately churn out the bottom of the funnel, if you will. And, you start to have these issues where you're spending way too much money to bring those customers in and they're not staying.
Yep, no, that's a great example. Thanks for going through that. So we're going to take a quick break and make the audience aware of the SBI podcast. When we come back, we'll discuss how to break down barriers between departments and have productive relationships with your peers.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI podcast. SBI podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Welcome back. We started off our show today discussing some common issues that lead to poor communication between functional peers. We talked a little bit about an example of a new product launch and tying that to a headcount plan. So now let's take that example and start talking a little bit about the implications of how something like that might impact marketing.
Yeah. So in the previous example, we talked about launching a new product and how the sales headcount plan wasn't tied to the product roadmap correctly. So let's talk about how marketing wasn't in alignment in this scenario. So the CEO was grew up through product, and he came to the product leader and said, all right, let's roll out this new product. But what they didn't do is go to marketing and make sure that marketing knew how to market the product and how many leads were needed to drive revenue and drive enough demand for sales. So when we came in to talk to the sales reps, they didn't have any leads, right, for the new product. So then what do you do? There's really only two options. One was sales does all their own prospecting, right? Or they wait for marketing to catch up. Neither were good because one is much higher cost to have the sales reps do all their own prospecting. Number two, you'd be waiting and then the competition would be outpacing you.
Yeah. So I think a big reason for this is there's just lack of common objectives around the new product and what it's supposed to produce and how we're going to go generate demand for those types of things.
Can you explain that in more detail for the audience, please?
Yeah. So if you have a new product and you're going to launch a new product, there are goals typically assigned to that, right? I mean, you're spending in a lot of cases millions of dollars to develop these products, right? So you've got a revenue goal to hit. But if marketing is just focused on driving any lead or is driving demand for the old products, I mean, have they allocated the proper amount of budget to make sure that that new product is going to be successful? Yeah. I mean, if sales is not aware or, is just looking at, hey, $1 of revenue is $1 of revenue for me to make my number. I mean, do they really care about the new product? Are they going to sell the stuff they've had in the bag for 5 years that they can sell in their sleep? And it's not going to take a whole lot of effort and they're not going to have to go to new customers, et cetera. So, I mean, here's where you start to see alignment issues, bubble up and rear their ugly heads. Yeah,
and I think timing is super important here. So let's point that out for our audience. If you assign budget too late, right, then you need to go hire more heads to help do that because you need different types of marketers or different sales reps to bring that product to market. Then you're behind, right? Because it takes time to bring the talent in and then ramp them up, right? So there's timing and then there's also alignment. And if you wait too long and be reactive like we talked about, then you're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure members of our audience know what it feels like to play from behind sometimes, and it's not a great feeling, especially when you're trying to make the number and make it through, having a successful new product.
So if there would have been proactive communication between the different functions, in advance of this launch, if product, marketing, and sales would have all been on the same page, do you think we could have kept this from happening?
Yeah, I mean, this type of miscommunication can have a huge and lasting impact on the organization. So why? I mean, decisions are getting made in silos and, using one department's opinion or data, and the wrong decisions ultimately get made. And I mean, some people watching this might say, yeah, I mean, I have my data, marketing has their data, sales has their data. So ultimately, you start making the wrong decisions because you're not well aligned.
Yeah. If the product, marketing, and sales leaders would have been strategically aligned, this would have been addressed way prior to the launch. By having a regular cadence to discuss priorities, dependencies, objectives, market intel, you get ahead of the issue and you coordinate for success before you need it.
Yeah, and in this example, I mean, the client ended up learning the hard way. They pumped millions of dollars into a failed product launch, and ultimately, it didn't produce the results.
Yeah, this is one of many examples of alignment issues that hurt growth and are avoidable. Ryan, who do you think owns ensuring the organization is aligned across functions?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's got to be the CEO because he or she is the one driving the bus. But the head of each department shouldn't necessarily passively wait for the CEO to show them how. Taking some initiative and getting strategically aligned with your peers to really focus on how you're going to make those numbers. And if you don't have these things, I mean, these are great conversations to be having in your monthly offsites or quarterly benchmarking reviews or what have you. But making sure that you're having these conversations of, do we have these things? And if not, I mean, we should start to think about creating them.
Yeah, when we come into organizations, you can tell very quickly if there's good alignment because you see how their cadence is as far as how they communicate. And you can tell a great leader from a good leader on how well they align to their functional peers.
Or even if they communicate.
Yeah, or if. That's another one. Yeah, good point. All right, we're going to take one more short break and then come back and explain how to ensure you are strategically aligned throughout your organization.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back, everyone. You are watching the Gru and Togs podcast show. In the first couple segments of the show, we discussed common issues with peer communication across functions, and we walked through an example where poor communication led to a failed product launch that left marketing and sales in a tough spot.
Yes, we've talked a lot about alignment, and we've given a lot of examples of poor alignment. So now let's talk a little bit about how to stay in strategic alignment. And it's not easy. So. But we have a couple of things here that you might value. So here we'll be using our How to Make Your Number in 2016 workbook to frame up the conversation. And if you have the workbook handy or you want to refer back to it later, we're on page 217, all the way in the back. And so let's now look at what this visual here, which is the annual strategic planning process visual. So the first point here is what you should be doing in Q3, which is validating your market research and your corporate strategy. And this is key because you need to ensure your strategy is still the right one to win heading into next year.
Yep.
So Scott, what's an example of maybe how to do this?
Yeah, so the market research piece is extremely important, right? Because that helps you validate from an outward-in perspective that you have the right strategy and you're going to execute the right tactics. So doing things like we talked about earlier, looking at the market, right? Doing account segmentation, buyer segmentation, user segmentation, doing activities like win-loss interviews, customer focus groups, gathering all that outward-in information and making sure it gets built into your strategy so you have the right strategy going into next year.
Yeah, and you mentioned one thing earlier. We talked about levels 1 through level 5, and being a level 5 means you're looking at things externally and bringing those into your strategy for next year. So, look, the world changes quickly. Mm-hmm. The internet, technology, everything else. So, if you're not looking at these things at least on an annual basis, chances are your planning process is going to have some flaws in it. So,
one thing I want to point out on that, Ryan, sorry to interrupt you, is on the market research, a lot of people are gathering this data. So people are probably thinking, we do market research, we gather this data. But is it really being driven into the business on a daily basis, right? So taking it, driving into your strategy, driving it through all the tactics in the business, that's usually where we see the breakdown.
Yep. Yeah, so what gets learned by the person doing the research? Does it ever make it into the hands of a sales rep would be a good example of that. And so does the rep know that the buyer thinks about things differently than he or she was a year or two ago?
Yeah.
So, all right, so now let's talk about what to do with that information in Q4. So in Q4 here, it's all about refining the functional strategy. So you do this using the market research and your corporate strategy, and you're really using that to inform each functional strategy. So how does that get done?
Yeah, so you do this through looking across each strategy and starting with the corporate strategy or the market and saying, what's changing our market? How is that going to change our corporate strategy and how we win? And then once we define that or redefine that, then we need to make sure that all the other strategies are in alignment. Right?
So would an example of that be, maybe the CEO has made a decision that we're going to go pursue markets in Asia. And now the marketing strategy, that has to inform marketing, it has to inform product. Are we going to sell the same products in Asia that we're selling over here? Yeah. How about marketing? Not only do they have to probably create new content, but they have to do it perhaps in multiple different languages. So do we even have that capability?
Yeah.
And so that has to be tied into that functional strategy.
Absolutely. If you look across the entire chain there from market, corporate, product, when you start in the market, you'd ask the question, what market are we going after, right? Asia. All right. What accounts in Asia? Yep. How do the buyers make purchasing decisions? What do the users want there? Right? And then you have to make sure that's built into every single one of the strategies.
Yep, it's got to inform everybody from marketing to sales to product on down to the talent that you bring into the organization. Yep. All right, so let's look at Q1, which is we're now in the beginning of the year. We're going to launch these strategies, and we want to make sure that everybody in the organization really understands them. So when's a good time to do that, and how would I communicate that?
Yeah, so a lot of times SKO is a convenient event to do this at. Really the key here is you need to launch the strategy, but it has to be simple enough where everyone can understand it, right? Some companies just throw out a strategy and say, read this thing and figure it out, and we expect you to be aligned. So there's got to be some key talking points, like what's our goal as a company, right? So what's our BHAG is that one term, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Who are our key customers and markets we're going to go after, right? What's our value proposition? Can everybody articulate that correctly? So focus on some key components that are really important to your strategies.
Yeah, and making sure that at the SKO, or at least in your first quarter, I mean, it gets all the way down to the field. Yep. So people actually know that the world has changed inside your organization, why it's changed, and what their responsibility is to now go and help execute those different things in your strategy.
And best-in-class companies, if you look at level 3 versus 4 or 5, right? Level 3 would make sure everybody in that silo knows it, but level 4 cross-pollinates, right? So I would know marketing's strategy as well. I would know our talent strategy, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the reps actually know when campaigns are going to be running into Asia in this example. So, all right, and then lastly here is Q2. So this is all about refreshing the strategies based on live ammo and changes in either market research or even potentially in results that you're having.
Yeah, so everybody knows how fast things are accelerating in business these days. You can't sit around and use the same strategy for a year, right? Now your corporate strategy might stay similar throughout the year, but your functional strategies, you got to be agile. And there has to be quarterly changes to them based on changing market conditions and things you're seeing in the market.
So what are some things you would change, and like what environment does that happen in between the executives?
Yeah, so we're going to go into the quarterly business review and how you use that to do this. So the quarterly business review is where you get the entire executive team together and you take all the market data, all the data to validate your assumptions, and you use that to determine what changes need to be made. And it should be very outward in based on what the market is telling us.
Okay, so that sounds like a lot. So like, what am I covering on those calls? What am I covering in those quarterly reviews? Like, how do I actually, make that happen with all the other things that I have to get done?
Yeah, I mean, this is the job of an executive, right? To build the right strategy. So this shouldn't just happen once a quarter in a QBR. There should be updates throughout the quarter. Market research should be being consumed by those executives. There should be some pre-work and things done before the meeting. So those 2 days on site are all about making decisions, right? So you're actually changing the strategy. You're not reviewing them. So when you leave that meeting, changes to the strategy have been made, and you're now ready to go in the next quarter with the right strategy that's outward facing.
Yeah, and you might also look at how you're allocating those resources against budget versus the results that you're generating. And so if the return's not materializing, I mean, make a change, right? So where are we going to stop spending and where are we going to invest more or double down because we're actually getting the results that we wanted?
I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because strategy is as much about what we're not going to do as what we're going to do.
Yeah, great point. I mean, a lot of companies want to try and boil the ocean and say, well, we're going to do all of these things this year, but I mean, you either don't have the arms and legs to attack it, or you end up just sort of doing a lot of things sort of mediocre. Yep. In a mediocre way.
All right, so beyond these quarterly strategy updates and what Ryan just covered here, there's ongoing communication between the functional leaders in between each one of those, which is the key to making this live on. So let's talk about the weekly calls for a second. Excuse me. You should have a weekly one-on-one 60-minute call with each of your functional peers. So that would be me as a sales leader having a call with you as a marketing leader, a call with the talent leader, a call with the product leader. And the subject of this call is, what's the market research telling us? What are the dependencies between our departments that need to be functioning correctly? What do I owe you? What do you owe me? And you should leave every one of those meetings very clear on what each of you are doing in your business and how to stay aligned.
And so that's a weekly meeting?
Weekly.
And one-on-one?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little about the executive meeting. So what's happening in that exec meeting on a monthly basis, and what are you getting done there?
Yeah, so every month there should be an executive meeting where you discuss and review the hierarchy of objectives, which are presented in something called a stoplight report.
Okay, so some of our viewers might have heard of that, others maybe not. So quickly define for the audience what a stoplight report is.
Yeah, so a stoplight report would list the top 2 to 3 objectives per area, right? So corporate, product, marketing, sales, and talent. What are the top 2 to 3 objectives? And they should all tie into each other, right? So my sales objectives should tie into what those key corporate objectives are. And then on the stoplight report, like a stoplight, they would be marked in red, yellow, or green. Red means you're way off the number, yellow means you're close, and green means you're beating the number, right?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great point, and something that Scott mentioned that shouldn't be lost on the audience here is that you have shared metrics between the functions. So a lot of times what will happen is, sales comes in with their dashboard, marketing's got their dashboard, product's got their dashboard, HR has their dashboard, but they're not connected. And so nobody's holding each other accountable to whether or not we've been successful or having challenges in certain areas. So, I mean, if marketing and sales share some KPIs and some metrics there to make sure that, for example, a lead gets followed up on within a certain amount of time, once it gets passed to a sales rep, I mean, now you can start to have real aligned and functional dialogue there instead of just saying, hey, the leads suck and, well, your guys can't close anything anyway.
Yeah, so a good example of that is some of the more progressive sales and marketing leaders are really aligned around sales enablement content. So marketing talks to sales and says, what do you need to win more often at the moment of truth? And sales tells them that. So they're both focused on win rate, which is a very important metric.
Yeah, great example.
Instead of just sales being focused on that.
Yeah, great example. All right, good discussion. So we're out of time for today's show. Thanks for joining Scott and I. We hope you've enjoyed watching us and picked up a few insights along the way. And if you enjoyed watching us today, I suggest you subscribe to SBI TV at salesbenchmarkindex.com/TV, or you can find us at our SBI YouTube channel. We've got some great guests confirmed for future episodes that you would not want to miss. And until then, we wish you the best of luck as you try and make your number. So long.
Cheers.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.